And you've just heard Sick and Tired by Emma Miller, and I'm delighted to be joined by Emma now. Hello, Emma.
Hello, Alistair. Lovely to be here.
It's lovely to have you on, and I asked you on in part because listeners will be interested in your music, but I think they'll also be interested in the way that you release and share your music, because it's a little bit different, which is, as I say, it's the main reason I wanted to speak to you. So first of all, before we go into what you're doing now, can you give us a bit of background to your life as a musician to this date?
Wow, as a musician to this date. I like the Reader's Digest version is grew up in Elgin, up in the northeast, would dabble in local talent shows, performing my own songs. And I'd kind of been writing songs since about 11 years old when I started secondary school. Didn't think I either had the pop star within me or the other side, which is like the highbrow conservatoire. So I thought that's probably about me. With the music, I'll go and do a proper person degree at Glasgow University, which I did. French and comparative literature, as it happens, and still was songwriting just as a hobby in the background. And when I graduated, I thought I'm gonna go and like pursue a bit of songwriting post uni before I go head into the world of work, and my life then is just booked up in the calendar from then on out. So I went to London. This really is the short version. I went to London and enrolled in a songwriting course for a year, so for like an academic year, and had the best time. I'd no intention of going to London. Did not appeal as a city to me. The first place I moved to was rat infested, and it was really an assault on the senses. But the thing that we had to do for this course, it was really, really practical. We had to write 3 songs a week. There was heavy feedback, criticism, or constructive criticism, I should say, and just was completely thrown into this world of fellow musicians for the first time. I'd never had this peer group of musicians. I was 24 when this happened as well, so slightly later, some would say, when it comes to music. And yeah, within that first year, I got management. I got a music lawyer who actually used to be Annie Lennox's music lawyer and manager for some time. And he funded my first set of songs.
Right.
So it was this strange, like, fairy tale experience of la 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 la. This is what happens when you go to London and you start doing music and gigging around. And then I think just gradually and organically, we parted ways. Are still like very on very good terms. Someone I get to call up and brainstorm with when I need to. And I spent 5 years in London doing music, being fairly worn down by just that way of life of working part-time jobs, doing music, being in like flats with your friends, having a great time, but just being in limbo. I felt a lot of the time, not really knowing where you're going or what's possible. And I never pursued the label route. So I didn't really place myself as trying to like play that game. So I'd already kind of ruled that out. And turns out maybe this isn't the Reader's Digest version, Alistair.
It's really interesting though.
I moved back to Elgin at the very end of 2019, thinking I'll gather myself up here.
Yeah.
And I'll work on this final body of music before I really do switch lanes and maybe go back into the whiskey industry, where I used to be a summertime whiskey distillery guide. And then pandemic times happened.
Yeah.
I was stuck up here. I self-released an EP. It got some like lovely little bits of coverage. And I started a course in counseling to become a counselor. And then I discovered music NFTs. And that is where I then went full circle back into doing music, actually for the very first time in a full-time capacity. And that is where we are just now, is I'm a full-time musician, been traveling the world, speaking at conferences, performing for collectors of mine who have bought into my music NFTs, and it's been completely life-changing.
So this is really interesting. It's a really interesting story from the start, because at the beginning, it almost sounds like a musical Dick Whittington. You know, you're off to London with your knapsack and you meet managers and songwriting. And if it stopped at that point, you would think this is the movie, this is a star or something. But then, as you see, you kind of struggled, but also just become maybe a bit disillusioned by a kind of industry that maybe, you know, wasn't what it used to be, or maybe wasn't giving you what you thought it might. So let's move on to how you've decided to approach it now with NFT, because when I hear NFTs, and I heard you talking about it when I met you at a gig recently when you were supporting that Colour Theory, and I thought, well, this is interesting because there's almost a kind of gut reaction to the term that this is a negative thing, you know, that this is something that is it. But so I'm really interested to hear your experience and how it has changed the way you work in music.
Yeah, there is a negative connotation with the word NFT. And it has really terrible press. There's like environmental kind of concerns, which comes from, we won't get into the reads with this, but kind of comes from Bitcoin, which is a blockchain, which I don't release my music on Bitcoin. I release my music on another blockchain called Ethereum, which is much more efficient. And yeah, I got into the space through something called Twitter Spaces, which within Twitter, there's a social audio aspect where basically it's like being on a live WhatsApp call with each other, and you've got a stage of speakers and an audience of listeners. And a friend of mine, a musician, was running these spaces with another musician and kept messaging me like, come in, come and perform. And one day I worked up the courage to come into this social audio platform, come up on stage, perform a song. And it was a completely new experience for me, having like not even the same as a gig. Like I do believe like nothing really beats the live experience. We can start there. But it does come close because the audience usually have been able to hear you speak. You've been introduced. You're not doing this highlights reel version that you get on other social media. And then you perform live. I would perform live from my living room, kind of hunched over my piano, trying to sing into my phone, very DIY. And the engagement that I received from that was completely different. Like people really following up with you, wanting to know how they could support. It's like they'd also had this new experience of no more gatekeeping, where they have access to the artists. I think many people know the likes of Spotify streams. I have no idea who those people are. That is gated information for me. I don't know where, like, I have almost nothing other than a vague city. And you also don't know how they've been listening. Maybe they've been listening completely passively, and they don't even register that it's your music. So it's a highly like engaged culture, and it's this, there's all these jargon and terms that you can throw around. But Web3 is something that's talked about a lot, which is seen to be like the next evolution of the internet. Web 1 being like emails and like basic transactions. Web 2 being social media, and Web 3 is kind of life taking place on the blockchain. And I released a really small collection of music NFTs in August, after I'd been spending about 6 months floating around in Twitter Spaces, performing, cultivating this audience who were familiar with the blockchain already. So the music NFT side, I wasn't convincing a non-believer into doing this. It was already kind of established communities. And just started with small collections, sold them out, had the community grow. And then in, a year later, actually almost in April and May, I launched a 1,000 piece music NFT collection, which is the largest to ever come from a UK artist. And I sold that out in May, launched it in April, sold it out in May. And that has effectively been, if you want to put it in these kind of terms, like my seed round of funding that you might get from a label. It's been effective enough to allow me to be full-time, to be traveling, performing, and delivering like creative experience for myself and for my collectors, whether that's going to be the vinyl pressings from the collection, 5 songs that I dropped with that collection. It might be a headline show that I put on only for specific top collectors who have collected like many of my NFTs. But yeah, about 174 people in total sold out that collection.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole notion of 1,000 true fans being the theory, that actually shifts quite a lot when you come into the music NFT scene, and it can be many, like a lot fewer than 1,000 to be sustainable. Certainly it's been my experience so far.
So how would you put it in terms of, or compare it in terms of what people are used to? You had that initial gig, so you say that was like a support slot to someone else who said, no, so then you've got an audience there who come for the support act. I know that doesn't always happen, but they do that time, think this is really good, and then follow it up. Would that be the old model that's kind of fits in then with what you're doing now? Or is there indeed a comparison to be made? Is it completely different?
I'm not sure I would compare it with like the gig side. I do think it's its own like unique thing. I actually don't think it's for everyone necessarily. Mm-hmm. And I certainly want to be balancing out my career with a bit of everything. Right now, a lot of my eggs are in like the crypto NFT basket, because that has been, it's such a fulfilling experience. But what I would compare it to really, which is an easy comparison, is more akin to the likes of the fundraisers that you have with artists, like these Kickstarters, where you're promised like an album if you contribute, like you'll get a CD pressing. The difference is, if you're involved with, just using Patreon, Kickstarter as an example, as the supporter or the collector, you're investing and then that's gone. Like you've hopefully got something out of it because you've supported an artist and maybe you absolutely love their music. But with this version, you also now hold an asset with the music NFT. So you have this digital asset or access pass. It's also a piece of art and music in my case. And then I'm choosing to activate it for different experiences. So people set their own value and what they are willing to sell it for. I also benefit from perpetual sales of my own NFTs. I'm getting 10% of every future sale. So that's like a small passive income as well. So for me, it's revalued arts and artists. And to compare it in like a more traditional sense, sometimes like the Kickstarter model is an easier way to like get your head around it initially.
Yeah. And so people that are using web, we've played one of your songs at the beginning, we're going to play another one, is the only place that people could get them if they wanted to get them from you directly with the NFT, and where would that be?
Yeah, so this is another really good ongoing topic in conversation, is whether you want to token gate your music and keep it behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. And I have chosen not to do that. So I have, in a sense, like I've not put these songs on streaming platforms, so they're not like nicely playable, or it's not an amazing like user experience to just find them on streaming. But if you want to go and search for them, you can. It would be part of the NFT collection. So my website is one place, emmamiller.xyz. And OpenSea is the biggest marketplace for NFTs. So you can technically click onto any of the images of my tracks and play them for free. It's a bit of a clunky experience, as I said, because you can't just sit back and then listen to everything. But the model that I've embraced is free to listen to, expensive to own. So that's the kind of philosophy I'm going for. I think there's very few artists who are choosing to do like a hard token gating of their music, but really not releasing on streaming is kind of like that is a big barrier. So it's something I'm looking to consider. And with my collection, I've also built up a council of like key members who have collected from me very regularly, like on a monthly basis. We meet up and I discuss my plans for the year. I use them as a sounding board, and that's kind of our next discussion, is how might I strategize like releasing these NFT songs onto traditional streaming, just to kind of keep growing across the board.
And I know you've previously had your music available on Bandcamp. Is this available on Bandcamp, or is that a similar thing?
Yeah, not available on Bandcamp. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And you talked about a community. How important is community to this model?
Yeah, it's crucial. It's fundamental. And I think initially, I really encourage artists to come into the space. And when I say the space, I do kind of mean Twitter in a sense, because that's where so much of the culture lives. I never used to have a Twitter account. I definitely relate to people who don't function on that app. And even people that have been there, they're like, it's just the degenerates of society. But it isn't. There's different pockets within that world of like this wonderful kind of really a revolution that's taking place on the music scene. And the community side, like just before our meeting, actually, I was hosting my weekly Friday open mic space, and that is with my community. So I kind of jump onto Twitter, invite everybody to come and share on the stage, and I run those Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So it's very like every single day I'm talking with my collectors and performing, and it might sound like a lot, but when I think of what people do to be present on social media, I don't have to think. I turn on a button, I turn up as myself. I don't have to curate this beautiful narrative. I have to try and do a bit of that on other platforms, which it's not my forte. But yeah, being able to just turn up as yourself and talk to people in an authentic way, I find has been really fulfilling.
And so if people wanted to join the community or even just dip their toes in and see, Twitter's the best way to do it, is it? Find you on Twitter and then go from there.
Yeah, find me on Twitter. My handle is at Emma Miller. So Emma Miller. And yeah, there's a real great group of artists, like Violetta Zeroni is a fantastic one who's championing the music scene. Josh Savage is a UK artist, fantastic artist. Matt Belmont, who has a band called Belmont, who have just launched an album on streaming as well. There's this like beautiful pocket of consistent activity. And I think once you start following those people, as we know, there's an algorithm, and hopefully it starts like bringing you to other like related things, and then you avoid the dangerous Elon Musk style versions of Twitter, if I can say that.
Yes,
hopefully he won't shut me down.
Fair enough. And if musicians listening want to learn more or perhaps get involved themselves, how would you recommend they go about it?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of information out there. I have found it's really difficult to describe, and when you start getting into the technicalities of it, that's quite off-putting actually. So I would once more encourage people to just come and live it for a little bit, like even for a week or two, dip your toe in the water, get familiar with some Twitter spaces. And if you can come in with a friend, or come in, like if you found me through like Alistair's podcast, then please like come and message me, and I will go out of my way to give you a friendly welcome into the space. I think that's the best practice, is to come in with other people. And Jill, actually from Color Theory, I know she's really interested in the space. So there's already little ripples within local music scenes that it could be an opportunity to kind of come in that way as well.
And it sounds like if you're getting involved now, you're almost getting in at a good kind of starter level, because if you say Web3 is going to be the next stage of online interaction, then that's only going to get bigger and bigger, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly believe that. I do think, again, this is based off of a market, so it's based off of cryptocurrency. Every blockchain is attached to cryptocurrency, and as soon as you start throwing the word cryptocurrency into the room, it's like people scatter. So that's still a highly volatile marketplace. It can go up and down and can be really scary. I don't dabble in the trading of any of that, and that's my advice, is to just come in for the art, come in for the community, and see where it takes you. But to bear that in mind, and bear in mind that this is a supposed bear market that we're in at the moment, so it is maybe more of a struggle. But yeah, I think it's a huge moment specifically for independent artists to come in right now. There's many labels on the periphery trying to work out how to use this space. some coming in and launching projects and failing because they don't really understand how to grasp it just yet. So I think there's a real moment for indie artists specifically, because we own all our own rights, we own our own masters, we can make these quick decisions. We don't have 100 different bits of bureaucracy to go through. So yeah, I would really encourage other artists to come in and have a look, and even you don't have to do my version of jumping in head first. You can still be doing everything else that you're currently doing, but I think it's an opportunity to start building a profile within this space as well.
It's so interesting. I would say to people, yeah, just try and get rid of any prejudices you have over the terminology, which, you know, people have heard. If you can push past that, there's something really interesting going on, and what you're doing is a great example of it. Emma, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It's been absolutely fascinating.
Thank you so much, Alistair. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure. Appreciate it.
And this is Emma Miller, and Run.